My name is Elena, and ever since I was a child, dreams have played a haunting role in my life. I'm not talking about the usual dreams that fade upon waking, but those that cling to reality, leaving a lingering shadow even in the daylight. Dreams that seem more like warnings than illusions, omens of something dark on the horizon. This is the story of how those dreams have shaped my existence, pulling me into a world where the line between reality and nightmare grows ever thinner. The first strange dream I had, when I thought it was simply sleep paralysis, happened when I was a child. I remember it well because, at the time, before anyone explained what was behind it, and that I didn't need to worry, those episodes seemed absolutely terrifying to me. On that occasion, I fell asleep listening to my parents argue. They had never resorted to physical aggression, but days earlier, my mother had thrown one of my toys at my father, a small pony she was gripping tighter and tighter as the argument intensified. My father was cruel with his words and always knew where to strike her, where to make her crumble. He would tell her that she had given up everything to be a mother, to be a housewife, and that she couldn't even do that well, that she couldn't do it without feeling inadequate. You can imagine. The next thing I remember is seeing him duck as my toy barely missed his head, and then seeing my mom's furious eyes, completely filled with anger and rage, eyes I had never seen before. I recall that moment of silence when neither of them dared to say anything. And even though I felt surprise and a lot of fear, I decided to do something, cry and scream. I didn't want to, but it was the only thing I could think of at that moment to draw attention to myself so the fight wouldn't escalate. And it worked. That time, it worked. But I couldn't do it every time I was afraid that line would be crossed again, and I was tired, increasingly tired. My brother had moved out of our city to live with our uncles and attend college. According to him, and I'm absolutely certain though he never admitted it, he chose a major not offered in our city just so he could leave. Here in Mexico, unlike in the United States and other countries, kids usually live with their parents while finishing their studies. But he was determined not to, and that's how he managed it. He left me with that burden. Me, worried every day. Me, who was a child and didn't deserve it. I was tired of them repeating over and over that they were together only because of me, only because they loved me. It took me so long to forgive myself for that because I felt their daily unhappiness was entirely my fault, that it was my responsibility they were together and now, in that moment, that they wouldn't end up killing each other. One night after a day when they had fought since morning, I simply decided to go to bed, try to sleep. But I could hear their voices arguing in the living room and then in their bedroom. I heard my mom leave to sleep in the living room and my dad follow her because they hadn't finished fighting. I heard heavy footsteps stomping from the living room to their bedroom, passing in front of my door. Then I heard them walk back. They passed back and forth, over and over. Finally, I opened my eyes but couldn't move. I realized I couldn't move. The door was open. I saw something passing from one parent to the other as they argued, without noticing its presence. It was a stain, a red stain, a burnt red, almost black. I saw it blurry through my tear-filled eyes. I tried to concentrate, to focus. I saw it pass once more. Then it stood still in front of my open door. It realized I had seen it. It stared at me. After a few seconds, it began to take shape. I don't know if it did, or if my eyes did it for me, if my brain tried to see an image it recognized. What was outside my room was a red figure with horns, like the one from the lottery game. He held his tail in his hands and wouldn't stop looking at me. He wasn't laughing, but I could sense something mocking coming from him. I didn't need to see it. Then he continued walking back and forth down the hallway over and over, and I remained there, unable to move, crying in fear, crying in anger. The dreams became sporadic, but in retrospect I realized that many of them happened at very significant moments in my life. Good and bad, mostly bad. The few deaths that have occurred in my family have all been horrible, and all have been preceded by one of these dreams. I was 17 when I woke up again at 3 a.m. I didn't look at the clock, but I knew. It was always like that. My room was completely dark. I always left a small lamp on. I was afraid of the dark, but someone had turned it off even though the switch was stiff and it couldn't have happened due to an electrical fault. I woke up and couldn't fully open my eyes. I couldn't move. As the minutes passed, I began to wake up because I started to forget the dream I was having, because I was gaining consciousness, because I could try to look around the room. But I still couldn't move. My body was completely rigid. Then I saw something in the corner of my room sitting. There was no chair there, but it seemed to be sitting on one. It was very dark, but as my eyes strained, adjusting to the darkness, I thought I recognized something, a shape. It was a woman sitting there wearing a long skirt made of several layers of fabric with her hands resting on her knees. She had ruffles on her sleeves. She was looking straight ahead toward the other end of the wall, smiling. I tried to go back to sleep, tried to stop seeing her. It felt awful. It made me very uncomfortable that she was there, although I wanted to think it was just my imagination. I opened my eyes again. Now she was looking at me. Her head was still facing forward, but her completely twisted eyes were glancing at me sideways while maintaining that horrible smile. Every time I opened my eyes, she was there. I couldn't stop seeing her until an hour later when I heard my dad get up earlier than usual. He showered, got ready, and left. He didn't come to say goodbye. I just heard him start the car with some difficulty that early morning, and he left. He had an event at work that afternoon. After lunch, he had a sort of celebratory gathering on the terrace of his office building. My dad socialized, chatted with everyone as usual, even joked with his colleagues. Suddenly, he put his drink down on the table, wiped his mouth with a napkin, turned around, and walked toward the edge of the terrace. They called us to inform us an hour later. The strange thing was that in the previous days there had been no fights. He hadn't scolded me. Nothing had happened that could indicate something like this was about to occur, or was even a possibility. I never imagined my dad as someone who could harm himself, and those last weeks there was even a certain calm at home. My mom said later that perhaps that had been the eye of the hurricane, and I had another one of those dreams on the night that marked my life forever. I was still living with my mom, but she wasn't home. She was celebrating her best friend's 25th wedding anniversary, I believe. She had insisted that I go, that it would do me good, that Julia, her friend's daughter, wanted to reconnect with me, be friends like when we were kids. But honestly, snobby people bore me terribly, so I decided to stay home. At 3 a.m., I opened my eyes. I heard my mom arrive home. She walked to my bedroom door. She opened it. I pretended to be asleep so she wouldn't talk to me, but I heard her simply enter and crawl under my bed. "I'm here, okay? Down here. Don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me, please." The voice was my mom's and yet a different voice. I had never felt like this. I was very scared, but her telling me that made me feel I had to look. I had to peek under the bed. There was something they didn't want me to see, something I had to see. Then I realized I could suddenly move. The most I did was peek a little from atop the bed, but I didn't dare get down. I fell asleep as I always did when this happened, without daring to run away. In the morning, we received a call. It was my brother's girlfriend. She told us they were at a party in the early morning. He went out to smoke when a black car with tinted windows arrived. Neither she nor the people around could see inside. They just saw the car stop next to my brother. Someone rolled down the window and talked to him. My brother turned to them, to his girlfriend, waved goodbye, and got into the car. That was the last time she saw him. She hadn't heard from him in hours, so she decided to contact us to see if we had any clue who it could have been. We had no idea who might have come for him. We hadn't seen him for a couple of years, and we never saw him again. No one ever heard anything about him or that car he got into. It was as if the earth had swallowed him up. And perhaps I don't express the pain I should. I know. But the age difference made us not the closest siblings. Once he left the city, he rarely returned. He distanced himself from us, especially after my father's death, which I feel he always believed was our responsibility. Before continuing, I want to thank you all for sticking around. I want to remind you that when there are chapters or episodes you particularly like, please let us know with a comment or a message on social media. It's very important for us to know what kind of content you enjoy the most, what you want to hear. In the description of this episode, you'll find all the links you need to become part of this community. And now, let's continue with the rest of this story. After that, I had fewer and fewer dreams of that kind, fewer instances of sleep paralysis. For years, I stopped having them, and that brings us to today, at 27 years old, to the present time when this story continues. Nowadays, I live with Franco, my boyfriend of 2 years. Well, although he still has his own apartment, he practically lives with me. He spends at least 4 days a week here because my house is very close to his work. Plus, he helps with expenses, and that's always good. Before, I had to share the house with a girl, but I don't know. Something about her customs, and her religion made me feel very uncomfortable. She was always performing cleansings throughout the house and sprinkling holy water, and it made me feel almost sick. With Franco, I sleep peacefully, very peacefully. I feel protected. But a couple of months ago, things started to happen. A kind of omen began to occur. We used to watch movies until we fell asleep. Many times we left the TV on because I'm still not used to sleeping completely in the dark, with the lights off. But all of a sudden, the television started to malfunction. A kind of interference signal would come in, a magnetism that had nothing to do with the TV signal, causing even digital platforms to fail, display poorly, and desynchronize image and sound. Shadows of people would appear on the screen when they weren't there yet. Since that happened on all platforms, on TV, on cable, we gave up and started going to sleep early, turning off the lights despite my fear, my night terrors, the possibility that something might return, that at some point those dreams, those damn dreams, would come back. Because even when they heralded something good, the terror they made me feel was unbearable. And then the uncertainty when the dream ended. The uncertainty remained. Knowing that something important, something that could change my life, was coming without knowing if it was good or bad. It's a feeling I prefer never, ever to experience again. I woke up one early morning. My heart trembled again. I couldn't move. I didn't need to look at the clock to know what time it was. I was facing away from Franco. I started to cry so he would hear me, but I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't move even my mouth. I tried to mumble. "Are you okay?" he asked me, more asleep than awake. No, I said, barely making a sound. "Okay, my love, it's a dream, okay?" he said, and kissed the back of my head. As he did that, he squeezed my shoulders and it hurt. He was very rough. He never did that kind of thing, but I couldn't move. Then I heard a sound in the bathroom, then someone walking down the hallway and returning to the bedroom. And I recognized the footsteps. It was Franco. And even though I couldn't move, I began to cry a lot out of fear. And he, realizing it, turned on the light and moved me until my body woke up, so to speak. And finally I could move. I was very scared. I looked all around my room, peeked under the bed. I told him that someone was there, that he had spoken to me with his voice, that he kissed me on the head and squeezed my shoulders, which still hurt, that I could still feel the fingers poking me. But he checked me, and I didn't have a single mark. I had told Franco about those dreams I used to have, but I don't think he ever took them seriously, at least not that seriously, because he would even laugh a little when he saw me so scared. He would tell me I couldn't be scared of sleep paralysis, that he couldn't believe that was it, that the dead had climbed on me. And even though I didn't believe him or wasn't convinced, I was too embarrassed to insist. He was the voice of reason, and I ended up being a fearful, superstitious person who believed in that kind of nonsense. Anyone who has had a supernatural experience has faced that feeling at one time or another, because even if there are people who believe you, there will always be someone who makes you feel like that, like you're crazy, like you're ignorant. I tried to relax, tried to forget everything. 2 nights passed where I started to sleep better, realizing that it was all too unbelievable, like something out of a story, a horror movie. It didn't have to be. I needed to be clear-headed, mature, confident in myself. I was an adult, for God's sake. I couldn't have those fears forever. So on the third night, I even decided to turn off the light, the small lamp I slept with. I went to bed very confident. I lay down facing the middle of the bed, toward Franco. I breathed deeply, sure that I was going to sleep well. I breathed again and again, certain of having a restorative night's sleep. I breathed deeply, knowing that nothing could disturb me. I was warm, wrapped in my blanket. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. I slept deeply. Slept. But something told me deep down that I might wake up at 3 a.m. again, that sleep paralysis might happen that night. But I slept. Sleep. Something woke me. It was 3:03 a.m. I had already gotten used to it, but this time was different. I heard my boyfriend call me, but his voice sounded very different, distant. I supposed it was because he was still far away in my dream, even though he was next to me. Helena. As best I could, I turned toward him. I opened my eyes, but as soon as I did, the paralysis came again. But I could see him. Asleep, deeply asleep on his side, facing me. Then I realized that the one calling me wasn't him. It was someone behind him. There was someone in our room. I heard the bed move. Something was approaching. Something had climbed on. Then I saw the fingers of 2 hands, blackened with grime, very long, starting to wrap around my boyfriend's shoulder. Very dirty hair started to rise behind him. There was someone on the bed, slowly appearing behind him, revealing herself. "Helena, it's time, come with me, she said, smiling. I saw that woman get up, leave the room, leaving the door open. I sat up, realizing I could move. Yes, I was asleep. It was different from any other time. I went out. The woman was in the living room waiting for me, with the door to the street open, and as soon as she saw me, she left. I tried to catch up to her, to follow her, but when I got to the door, there were many women out there, about 6 or 7 standing in the yard. They were all beckoning to me with their hands, all calling me by my name. Their faces were smiling, kind. They made me feel loved. They made me feel part of them. They spoke to me with their hands. And the street was also full of people, many women. But among them were some men, 3 or 4, and they had very small horns, little horns coming out of their foreheads. They were just standing there with them, and they started to talk to me too. "Come, Helena, come. It's time. Come, it's time. Come, it's time. The next thing I remember is Franco hugging me in bed. I couldn't stop crying. I was sweating, and he was crying too. He was also drenched in sweat. I asked him what was happening, and he just kept telling me that everything was okay. That everything was okay now. That he believed me now. That he was going to take care of me. That he would never leave me alone. I didn't understand anything, but the way he spoke to me, his uncontrolled sobbing that I had never seen before, made me cry even more too. We cried until dawn. At Franco's request, we called my mom. We asked if we could visit her. My mom had been living for some months with my great-grandmother in her village. She's very old now, very tired, and they have to help her all the time. When we told her, my mom was very happy. She had been telling me for some time to come, that we never knew when it would be the last time I could chat with my great-grandmother, to take advantage of it, to talk with her. I was in very bad physical shape. That last dream had made me sick. I was very weak. But Franco told me he would accompany me, and that encouraged me to try. Besides, I wanted to get away from my house. When I looked out the window, I would see again in my mind, in my memories, those women out there. And despite the smiles, despite how kind they seemed, they scared me a lot. We drove toward the village, and what should have been a little over a couple of hours turned into 8. An accident halfway, and the rain made us practically stop for much of the journey. I always try to be a good co-pilot, chat, play music, but I was so tired that at one point I moved to the back seat and lay down to sleep for 5 minutes. And well, poor Franco kept driving with only the GPS for company. He had never been there before, but he managed to get there, even with the confusing streets entering the town, even with the rain. Like a little girl upon arriving, they decided not to wake me. I sleep heavily, but not that much. It seemed strange to me that he could carry me to leave me in my mom's room where she slept, which she had prepared for us. I stayed sound asleep until 9 or 9:30 at night, when the voices and laughter of several ladies caught my attention. My mom and great-grandmother were also laughing in what seemed like a very fun conversation. I heard Franco's voice in the background, chatting and laughing. They were having a gathering. So I got up, looked at myself in the mirror, fixed my hair, and went out to greet them, embarrassed for not having realized what time we had arrived. When I came out, I froze. The house was full of ladies, and I recognized without a doubt, without the slightest doubt, that practically half of them were the women who were in my yard, the ones who were on the street at my house in my dream, the ones who were calling me. They greeted me now in the most casual way, as if they had never seen me. And perhaps that's how it was. I don't know. It seems very strange to me. Have you heard that we can't dream of a face we haven't seen before? That our brain can't create a face out of nothing, and that's why all those who appear in dreams in the background, as extras so to speak, are people we've seen at some point in our lives, even if we just crossed paths on the street. I was sure I had never seen those women, completely sure. But even so, they were the ones I had dreamed about. My mom noticed my discomfort and made up an excuse to end the gathering quickly, so they would leave. My great-grandmother didn't notice anything. It was very difficult to try to explain to my mom and Franco the reason for my behavior, to tell them that some of those women who were there were the ones from my dream. But my mom told me something with a somewhat worried face. She didn't want to delve much into the topic, but knew that some of them were indeed kind of witches, that they dedicated themselves to doing works, that they went out at night to the mountains, that they roamed the cemetery, although she thought they were just stories, that they fooled people and that was it. I couldn't stay there much longer because now I felt physically threatened. Every night I felt they would return, but they had the decency not to come back while I was there. And this, everyone, brings me to the last thing that has happened in my story, something that happened just a few days ago. Once again, something woke me, but it wasn't 3 a.m. I heard footsteps walking down the hallway outside my room, reminding me of that first dream when I was a child, although this hallway was much shorter. I spoke to Franco, told him there was someone outside. I saw him, shook him, gave him a little nudge, and he wouldn't wake up. Something in this dream seemed more terrifying than usual, but I summoned up courage and went out. I saw a very tall woman in the hallway, a few steps from my room. When she saw me, she ran toward the living room. She sat on a chair where I couldn't see her. From the darkness, I asked, "What do you want? Who are you?" She didn't answer. Some arms grabbed me from behind. "Get out of here, let's go," shouted Franco, completely pale, scared to death but shouting toward the living room, trying to hide his terror. He put me behind him. He had a baseball bat I had never seen. He turned on the light, and there she was. A woman who smelled awful, like rotten herbs, who was completely dirty. "Get out of here, come on, let's go," he shouted very angrily. I couldn't believe I was awake. I went for the phone to call the police. I came in because it was open. "I need somewhere to stay. Let me stay here, I'm not doing anything," that woman was saying. She scared me a lot. Her teeth were black. Her face seemed to be all stained with who knows what. Franco turned to look at me. He told me to call the police as soon as possible, and then ran toward the woman, who, moving very quickly, ran out of the house toward the street, laughing as if it amused her. Franco went running after her. On the phone, the police were asking me confusing questions, as if they didn't believe me, that I didn't know the woman I was reporting. They wouldn't let me explain that it was a woman who had suddenly entered the house. I ended up hanging up when I saw that Franco returned. He told me he ran after her and felt that someone else was waiting for her outside. You have no idea the fear we slept with that night. Franco called a friend of his. We went to his apartment. The three of us stayed there. He didn't just call him to have someone else to protect me. He called him specifically because he was Christian. Since then, we've been in contact with him every day. We've started going to his community, and they've prayed for us. And I want to give my life to God, to a God who can protect me from this, from all the evil in the world, from all the evil I've looked in the eye. I know it's wrong to come to him just out of this fear, but Franco's friend says we all come when we need him, and that God will always receive us. And yes, I know it's only been a few days, but now that we've been going to his house, that we've been praying, things have calmed down. The dreams, at least for now, haven't returned. Sometimes it's still hard to enter my house. I feel as if someone has been there, or as if someone runs to hide when I arrive. But I want to believe that this is the end. I hope to never have these damned witch dreams again. I can't take it anymore. I'm exhausted. Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening to my story. If you say a prayer today, please pray that it's truly over. May you sleep and dream well, you who still can.